Hello everyone, this is your Humble Fear script. In this video, I will tell you 3 scary stories about the Christmas holidays. Let's begin. The snow started falling the way it always does right before Christmas. Quietly, politely, as if it didn't want to disturb anyone. Big flakes drifted down through the yellow glow of the street lamps, settling on roofs and fences and the tops of mailboxes like a soft promise. I was house-sitting for my uncle while he spent the holidays out of state. His place sat at the edge of a small mountain town, far enough from the main road that the world went silent at night. No traffic, no neighbors close enough to hear, just trees, snow, and the slow creak of an old house learning to breathe again after dark. He'd warned me about the furnace knocking and the way the walls popped when temperatures dropped, but nothing about what happened when the bells rang. There was a string of small brass sleigh bells hanging from the back door, decorative, festive. My aunt had put them there years ago so she'd hear when someone came in from the porch. They hadn't been touched since autumn. The first night, I heard them just after midnight. It was a soft sound, one gentle jingle, then nothing. I told myself it was the house settling or a draft sneaking through the doorframe. Old houses make noises, especially in winter. I stayed where I was, staring at the dark ceiling, listening. Silence returned, thick and complete. The next night, the bells rang again. This time, twice. I was awake when it happened, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of something warm, watching snow stack up against the windows. The sound came from directly behind me. When I turned, the back door stood exactly as it had before. Locked, still. The bells swayed just slightly, as if they'd been brushed by a passing sleeve. I checked the porch. Smooth snow, no footprints, not even from an animal. That was when I noticed the path. A narrow trail cut through the yard from the tree line to the porch steps. It wasn't deep enough to be from boots. Too shallow, like something had been dragged or pulled itself forward slowly, disturbing the snow just enough to leave a mark. I covered it up with a shovel and told myself I was tired. On Christmas Eve, the power went out just before sunset. The house dropped into an early darkness, the kind that presses against the windows and makes rooms feel smaller than they should. I lit a few candles and tried to enjoy the quiet, but the silence felt different now. Expectant. That's when the bells rang again. Not softly this time. They shook violently, clattering together in a frantic burst, as if someone had grabbed them with both hands and rattled them in anger. I stood frozen in the hallway, heart pounding, every instinct screaming not to move. Then it stopped. I approached the door slowly. The air felt colder there, like winter itself was leaning in close. I placed my hand on the wood. It was freezing, far colder than the rest of the house. When I opened the door, the porch was empty, but the path was back. Only now it didn't stop at the steps. It ended directly in front of the door. That night, I dreamed of bells buried under snow, ringing endlessly beneath the surface, trapped and unheard. I woke to the sound of jingling. It was inside the house, slow, deliberate, moving room to room. I stayed in bed, barely breathing, listening as the sound drifted closer. The floorboards creaked under careful weight. The bells rang once, twice, just outside the bedroom door. A shadow stretched beneath the gap. Not a person's shadow. Too low, too thin. The handle turned. The bells rang one final time, right beside my ear. Morning came suddenly, harsh and bright, as if the night had been wiped clean. I sat up, gasping, the room empty and untouched. The door was closed. No marks, no frost, no shadow. I packed my things immediately. Before leaving, I noticed something near the back door. The bells were gone. In their place hung a short length of frayed string, cut cleanly at the end. Outside, the snow was untouched. No path, no trail, just smooth white ground reflecting the winter sun. As I drove away, I passed the tree line at the edge of the yard. Something dark sat half-buried among the roots. I didn't stop to look. I didn't need to. Every Christmas since then, when the air gets quiet and the snow falls just right, I swear I hear bells ringing somewhere beneath the ground, still waiting for someone else to answer the door. While the door is closed, Let's move on to the next story. Every December, the town rang the bell. No one remembered when the tradition started. It was older than the post office, older than the church steeple that leaned slightly east, as if tired. All anyone knew was that on Christmas Eve, just after sunset, the bell on the hill was rung once. Only once, and then everyone went home. The bell tower stood alone at the edge of the woods, a narrow wooden structure with a single rope and a bell so old its surface had gone dull and black. Children were warned never to climb it. Adults avoided it except on that one evening. That year, the man who usually rang it didn't show up. His name was Eli Mercer, and he had done it every year for as long as anyone could remember. Quiet man, careful man. He never stayed long afterward, never joined the dinners or drinks. He rang the bell, nodded to whoever was watching, and walked back into town alone. When Eli didn't arrive by dusk, people waited. Snow began to fall, light at first, then steady. The sky dimmed. A few townsfolk gathered at the base of the hill, whispering excuses for his absence. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he slipped on the ice. Maybe he'd simply forgotten. No one wanted to suggest the other reason. Finally, someone said the bell still had to be rung. Tradition was tradition. That's how I ended up climbing the hill. I was new in town, staying with my aunt for the winter. Outsiders were useful when no one else wanted to volunteer. They handed me a lantern, pointed me toward the trees, and told me it was simple. Pull the rope once. Don't linger. The path up the hill was narrow and half buried in snow. The woods pressed in close, branches sagging under white weight. The only sound was my own breathing and the soft crunch beneath my boots. When the tower came into view, my stomach tightened. The door stood open, creaked as I stepped inside. The lantern light revealed the rope hanging still, the bell above it silent and waiting. Snow had drifted through the doorway, forming uneven shapes on the floor. Footprints led inside. They were deep, uneven, and stopped directly beneath the bell. I should have turned around. Instead, I reached for the rope. It was colder than it should have been. Not just cold, biting like bare metal left out overnight. I wrapped my hand around it anyway and pulled. The bell rang. The sound was wrong. Instead of a clean toll, it came out stretched and heavy, like something dragged across frozen ground. The vibration traveled through the rope and into my arm, settling deep in my chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard breathing. Came from above me. Slow, wet, too close. The lantern flickered as something shifted in the darkness near the bell. I tilted the light upward just enough to see a shape pressed against the beams. A man-sized figure crouched unnaturally, limbs bent the wrong way, face hidden in shadow. It dropped. I stumbled back, slipping on snow, heart hammering. The figure landed silently and straightened to its full height. As it stepped into the lantern glow, recognition hit me harder than fear. It was Eli Mercer, or something wearing him. His skin was pale and stretched tight, eyes sunk deep and glassy, mouth pulled into a stiff imitation of a smile. Frost crusted his clothes. His chest didn't rise when he breathed. Yet the sound continued, rasping through his open mouth. "You rang it," he said. His voice echoed strangely, like it didn't belong to the space it came from. I backed toward the door. He took a step forward, snow crunching under bare feet. "Now it knows," he continued. "Now it counts." "What?" I whispered, his head tilted sharply, bones popping. "It comes when the bell is rung. It leaves when it's fed." Something moved behind him, deeper in the tower. The shadows stretched and peeled themselves away from the walls, forming long, thin shapes that scraped softly against the wood. Hands. Too many of them. Eli smiled wider, skin cracking at the corners of his mouth. "I was late," he said. "So it stayed." The lantern went out. I ran. I don't remember making it down the hill. I don't remember reaching the town. I only remember the sound that followed me. The bell ringing again behind me, though I hadn't touched the rope. Once, twice, 3 times. The next morning, the tower was gone, collapsed, flattened beneath fresh snow, as if it had never been there. Eli Mercer was never found. The townspeople said nothing, only nodded when I packed my things and left. But every Christmas Eve since then, just after sunset, I hear a bell ringing somewhere far off, more than once, and I know it's counting again. The town put up its decorations early that year. Strings of lights hung from every lamppost, wreaths appeared on doors overnight, and a plastic nativity scene sat in the park, half buried in snow. It was meant to feel cheerful, but something about it all felt staged, like a smile held too long. I had moved there for a temporary job, the kind you take when you don't plan on staying. The house I rented was cheap, old, and fully furnished, right down to the dusty ornaments packed into a cardboard box in the basement. The landlord told me the previous tenant had left in a hurry after Christmas and never came back for their things. I didn't ask why. On the first evening of December, I found a wooden advent calendar hanging in the kitchen. 25 little doors, each painted with a number and a winter scene. It looked handmade and far older than the rest of the house. I didn't remember seeing it during the walkthrough, but I assumed it had been tucked away before. Out of habit, I opened door number 1. Inside was nothing but darkness. No chocolate, no paper slip, just a hollow space that seemed deeper than it should have been. I tilted the calendar, expecting something to fall out. Nothing did. The next morning, I noticed frost on the inside of the kitchen window. Not a thin layer, but thick, branching ice that looked like veins pressed against the glass. The heater was working fine. The rest of the house was warm. That night, I opened door number 2. Something cold brushed my fingertip. I pulled my hand back quickly, heart racing, but when I leaned closer, the compartment was empty again. Still, my finger ached long after, numb and stiff, as if it had been outside too long. By the 5th day, I had stopped telling myself it was nothing. Each door felt colder than the last. The air around the calendar seemed heavier, and sometimes, when the house was quiet, I thought I heard something shifting behind the thin wood, slow, careful movement, like breathing held just out of sync with my own. On December 7th, I woke to footprints in the hallway. Bare footprints. They started at the front door and ended directly in front of the advent calendar. No snow, no water, just pale impressions pressed into the wood floor, as if someone had walked through from another temperature entirely. I didn't open that day's door. That evening, the house felt wrong. The lights dimmed without flickering, shadows stretching too long along the walls. I sat in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, watching the dark doorway to the kitchen. Something creaked. Not the house settling. This was deliberate, slow. I stood there for a long time before finally forcing myself forward. The calendar hung exactly where it always had, but door number 7 was already open. Inside was an eye, not loose or rolling, fixed in place, unblinking, white rimmed with red. It stared directly at me, wet and alive, tracking every small movement I made. I slammed the door shut. That night, I dreamed of winter fields and buried things, of hands pressing upward from beneath the snow, counting. I tried to remove the calendar the next morning. The nail refused to budge. When I pulled harder, the wood around it groaned like it might split the wall itself. I stopped when I felt a sharp pain in my wrist, followed by a familiar numb cold. By December 10th, the house no longer warmed properly. My breath fogged indoors. Ice formed in the sink. The calendar doors rattled softly whenever I passed, like teeth chattering. Each morning, another door stood open on its own. Inside them were pieces, fingernails, teeth, a strip of skin still dusted with snow. Always fresh, always cold. On the 24th, I didn't sleep. The calendar rattled constantly now, all the doors trembling at once. The sound filled the house, overlapping clicks and taps, building towards something unbearable. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the final door. Number 25. The rattling stopped. The door opened slowly on its own. Inside was nothing. Then the air shifted behind me. I turned just in time to see frost bloom across the walls, racing outward from the calendar like a living thing. The room dropped into a deep, unnatural cold, and the shadows gathered near the corners, thickening, stacking, shaping themselves into something tall and thin. A voice came from the empty compartment. Not loud, not angry, counting. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of town, lights glowing behind me like a lie. When I looked back, the house was dark and silent, snow already erasing my footprints. Weeks later, I heard someone else had moved in. They put up decorations early, and on December 1st, they found a calendar waiting for them in the kitchen, already open to door number 1.